The German Tiger tank was supposed to be unstoppable. Thick armor, massive gun, pure terror on tracks. But there's one tank that made it completely useless before it even rolled off the production line. And it wasn't built by the Americans or the British. The T-34, a Soviet tank that most people think was just okay. But here's what nobody talks about. This machine didn't just fight the Tiger tank. It made the entire concept of the Tiger obsolete before the Germans even knew what hit them. And the way it happened is nothing like what you've been told. Today I'm going to show you exactly how a tank that looked simple on paper completely destroyed Germany's most feared weapon. And by the end, you'll understand why the Tiger was actually a massive mistake from day one. Let me paint you a picture. It's 1942. The German war machine is rolling across Europe like nothing can stop it. Their tanks are crushing everything. The Panzer III, the Panzer IV, these things are making quick work of whatever the Allies throw at them. So the German high command gets cocky. They think bigger is better. Thicker armor is better. Enter the Tiger tank project. This thing was massive. We're talking about a 57-ton monster with armor so thick that most Allied guns couldn't even scratch it. The front armor was 102 millimeters thick. The gun, an 88 millimeters cannon that could punch through pretty much any tank at crazy long ranges. On paper, this thing looked like it would end the war. But here's where things get interesting. While the Germans were busy building their super tank, the Soviets were taking a completely different approach. And this is where most history books get it wrong. They make it sound like the T-34 was just another tank that happened to be good. But that's not what happened at all. The T-34 wasn't just good, it was revolutionary in ways that made the Tiger's entire design philosophy pointless. This tank rolled off the production line in 1940, 2 years before the Tiger was even a real thing. It had sloped armor, decent 76 millimeters gun, and it was fast. But those aren't the reasons it made the Tiger obsolete. The real genius of the T-34 was something nobody saw coming: mass production. See, when the Germans designed the Tiger, they were thinking like craftsmen. Each Tiger tank was basically hand-built. The manufacturing process was so complicated that Germany could only make about 1,350 Tiger tanks during the entire war. Think about that for a second. In 4 years of war, they managed to build 1,350 of these things. The Soviets built over 84,000 T-34 tanks. But wait, it gets better. Or worse, if you're German. The Tiger tank cost approximately 300,000 Reichsmarks to build. That's roughly 6 times more expensive than a Panzer IV. The T-34? The Soviets were cranking these out so efficiently that by 1943, they were building them faster than the Germans could destroy them. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but the Tiger was way better in combat, right? One Tiger could take out multiple T-34s. And you'd be right about that. In a one-on-one fight, the Tiger usually won. But here's what the German commanders didn't understand. World War II wasn't a series of one-on-one tank duels. Let me give you a real example of how this played out. Operation Citadel, also known as the Battle of Kursk, 1943. This was supposed to be Germany's big comeback. They brought everything they had, including their new Tiger tanks. The plan was simple: use the Tigers to punch through Soviet lines and win the war. The Germans showed up with about 200 Tiger tanks. Sound impressive until you realize the Soviets had over 3,000 T-34s waiting for them. But it gets even more insane than that. The Soviet production was so ramped up that even if the Germans destroyed 1,000 T-34s, the Soviets could replace them within weeks. About 60 kilometers. This meant German commanders had to position fuel trucks and supply. Meanwhile, if the Germans lost even 50 Tigers, it would take months to replace them. And this is where the psychology of war comes into play. German tank crews started to realize something terrifying. Every time they knocked out a T-34, 2 more showed up, then 4 more, then 8 more. It didn't matter how superior their individual tanks were. They were being swarmed. But production numbers are just part of the story. The T-34 had another advantage that completely broke the German tank strategy. It was designed for the real world, not for tank museums. The Tiger tank had this massive problem that German engineers either ignored or didn't care about. It was way too heavy. This thing weighed 57 tons. Most bridges in Eastern Europe couldn't support it. The tank would literally fall through bridges that the T-34 could cross without any problems. Think about how crazy this is. You build the most powerful tank in the world, but it can't cross half the bridges in the territory you're trying to conquer. German Tiger crews had to plan their routes around bridge weight limits. Meanwhile, T-34 crews could go anywhere. And it gets worse. The Tiger's weight made it a nightmare to maintain. The transmission would break down constantly. The final drive would crack under the stress. German mechanics needed specialized tools and parts that were always in short supply. A broken Tiger often stayed broken for weeks. The T-34? Soviet mechanics could fix most problems in the field with basic tools. The entire tank was designed around the idea that it needed to be simple to maintain and repair. While German Tiger crews were stuck waiting for spare parts, T-34 crews were back in action the same day. But here's the part that really shows how the T-34 made the Tiger obsolete: fuel consumption. The Tiger tank was basically a gas-guzzling monster. It could burn through its entire fuel supply in just 100 kilometers of road travel. In combat conditions, that range dropped to lines just to keep their Tigers moving. The T-34 could travel 300 kilometers on a single tank of fuel. This gave Soviet commanders incredible flexibility. They could launch surprise attacks, outflank German positions, and retreat when needed. The Tigers, meanwhile, were basically anchored to their fuel supply lines. This led to some absolutely ridiculous situations. German Tiger tanks would run out of fuel in the middle of battles and have to be abandoned. Not destroyed by enemy fire, just left behind because they couldn't move. The Soviets would literally capture these super tanks and use them against the Germans. Now let's talk about the manufacturing genius that really made the difference. The T-34 wasn't just mass-produced, it was smartly produced. Soviet engineers did something that German engineers thought was impossible. They made the T-34 better while making it cheaper and faster to build. In 1941, it took 8,000 man-hours to build a single T-34. By 1943, they had cut that down to 3,700 man-hours. They were literally doubling their production efficiency while the war was happening. How'd they do this? They threw out everything that didn't directly help the tank kill German tanks. No fancy interiors, no complex mechanical systems, no hand-fitted parts. Everything was designed to be welded together quickly by workers who might have been farmers 6 months earlier. The Germans, meanwhile, were still building Tigers like luxury cars. Each tank had hand-fitted parts, complex systems, and precision engineering. It was beautiful craftsmanship that took forever to complete, while Soviet T-34s were rolling off assembly lines like hamburgers at McDonald's. And here's something that's going to blow your mind. The T-34 got better throughout the war, while the Tiger actually got worse. In 1943, the Soviets upgraded the T-34 with an 85mm gun. This new gun could penetrate Tiger armor from reasonable combat distances. Suddenly, the Tiger's main advantage, its impenetrable armor, wasn't so impenetrable anymore. But because the T-34 was designed for easy modification, this upgrade was implemented across thousands of tanks within months. The Germans? They were stuck with their original Tiger design because retooling their complex manufacturing process would have taken years. So while the T-34 was evolving, the Tiger was frozen in time. But wait, there's another layer to this story that makes it even more interesting. The T-34 didn't just make the Tiger obsolete in combat. It made the entire German tank strategy obsolete. German tank doctrine was built around the idea of superior individual tanks fighting breakthrough battles. They wanted each tank to be a mobile fortress that could punch through enemy lines and cause chaos in the rear areas. This worked great in 1940 and 1941 when they were fighting countries that didn't have mass production capabilities. But the T-34 proved that quantity has a quality all its own. Soviet commanders weren't trying to build better individual tanks. They were building a better tank army. Instead of having a few super tanks, they had thousands of good enough tanks that could be everywhere at once. This forced the Germans into a completely unsustainable situation. They had to spread their precious Tigers across the entire Eastern Front to counter T-34 attacks that could come from anywhere. A single Tiger might be stationed to defend 50 kilometers of front line, while the Soviets could mass 100 T-34s for a concentrated attack on a 5-kilometer section. The math just didn't work in Germany's favor. No matter how good the Tiger was in individual combat, it couldn't be in 10 places at once. And the Soviets had enough T-34s to attack 10 places at once. Here's the moment when everyone realized the Tiger was obsolete, even if they didn't admit it at the time. It was the Battle of Prokhorovka, part of the larger Kursk operation, July 12, 1943. This was supposed to be the ultimate test of German tank superiority. The Germans brought their best Tiger tanks, Panther tanks, and Ferdinand tank destroyers. The plan was to smash through Soviet defenses with superior technology. What happened next changed tank warfare forever. The Soviets didn't try to match the Germans tank for tank. Instead, they threw 800 T-34s at the German positions in one massive wave. Not 800 tanks spread across the battlefield. 800 tanks concentrated in one area, attacking all at once. German Tiger crews found themselves facing something their training never prepared them for. Everywhere they looked, there were T-34s. They'd knock out one tank, and 3 more would appear. They'd destroy a dozen tanks, and 20 more would keep coming. The Tigers were technically superior, but they were completely overwhelmed. By the end of that single day, the German offensive was finished. Not because they ran out of ammunition or fuel, they still had plenty of both. They were finished because they realized something terrifying. It didn't matter how good their individual tanks were. The Soviets had an endless supply of T-34s, and Germany had maybe 200 Tigers on the entire Eastern Front. That was the moment, right there, when German commanders realized that their super tank strategy was a dead end. They could build the most powerful tank in the world, but if the enemy could build 10 decent tanks for every one of theirs, the math would never work out. After Prokhorovka, the German army never launched another major offensive operation on the Eastern Front. Not because they didn't want to, but because they finally understood that the T-34 had made their entire approach to tank warfare obsolete. So here's what really happened. The T-34 didn't make the Tiger obsolete by being a better tank in individual combat. It made the Tiger obsolete by proving that the entire concept of super tanks was wrong. The Germans thought they were playing chess, carefully moving powerful pieces around the board for maximum effect. But the Soviets were playing a completely different game. They were playing quantity over quality, mass production over precision engineering, and practical design over theoretical superiority. Every single advantage the Tiger had on paper became meaningless in the real world. Thicker armor didn't matter when you were outnumbered 10 to 1. A bigger gun didn't matter when you couldn't cross bridges to get to the battle. Superior engineering didn't matter when your tank was broken down waiting for spare parts while the enemy rolled past you. The T-34 proved that in modern warfare, being good enough and being everywhere is better than being perfect and being nowhere. It showed that a tank that could be mass-produced, easily maintained, and quickly deployed would always beat a tank that was individually superior, but impossible to build in meaningful numbers. By 1944, this lesson was so obvious that even the Germans started trying to copy it. They began developing simpler, cheaper tanks that could be mass-produced. But it was too late. The Soviets already had their 84,000 T-34s rolling across Eastern Europe, and no amount of German engineering genius could match that kind of industrial output. The Tiger tank was obsolete before it ever fired its first shot, because it represented the old way of thinking about warfare. The T-34 represented the future, and the future was about industrial capacity, not individual tank superiority. That's why when people ask which was the better tank, they're asking the wrong question. The T-34 wasn't necessarily better than the Tiger. It just made the Tiger irrelevant. And sometimes, making your enemy irrelevant is better than defeating them. If this kind of military history stuff interests you, hit that subscribe button because I've got way more stories like this coming up.